welcome to Vikings Happy Hour, where we mix our favorite beverage and talk of your Minnesota Vikings.
Hello, welcome back. It's another week of Vikings Happy Hour. This week on a Thursday, not a Wednesday, so we're that much closer to the weekend. I am joined by Ryan and Tyler from Climbing the Pocket, and a huge special guest, Thor Nystrom from NBC Sports Edge. He does NFL draft coverage, college football, you name it. I'm stoked to have all of you on tonight to dive into offensive line, wide receiver, two positions of need for the Minnesota Vikings. But before we get into that stuff, what does everybody have as a beverage tonight? This is happy hour. So if you are the DD and you're just drinking water, or you have a drink of choice, let's go around. I'll start. I got a vodka Sprite. This warm weather's getting me hyped for a refreshing drink. I don't have any beer on me either. So we'll toss it down the line here. Thor, what do you got?
I got a White Claws and an Nalgene. Usually you have to hide it, but like tonight I didn't realize. I just could have brought the can. But anyway, not water, folks. Not water.
Anytime on this show, you just bring the can. You don't need to hide it.
Okay, fair enough. Good to know.
Ryan?
I got my Angry Inch supporting local brewing here. So it's actually Love Potion 208, which is their hard seltzers. So it's a series of that. So this week's ginger and lemon. Give it a try.
Hell yeah.
All right.
Tyler.
My beer choice is from the Brewing Project. I believe they're just outside of Milwaukee. It's called Ooey Gooey. It is an imperial sour ale that is peanut butter and jelly flavored. Let me tell you.
And jelly.
It is really good.
That's next level.
This might actually be a beer you enjoy.
Next time you come over for NCAA, you got to bring some of that stuff.
I will.
That sounds absolutely horrible and too sweet.
Okay, if you drink
own...
basic surly, I don't want to hear it.
Well, that's because I wanted to try something from Minnesota that we don't get down here in Colorado. I'm drinking Uinta, whatever. Detour IPA, one of their nice ones. About, 10 ABV, somewhere in there. But everybody that's watching, grab your favorite beverage and welcome Thor Nystrom and our draft experts from Climbing the Pocket as we discuss your Minnesota Vikings and all the options available. Welcome, Thor.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Before I'm still kind of stuck on this peanut butter and jelly beer for a second, so I need to just ask: is it sold in Minnesota? Can I go to Total Wine and pick it up, or do I have to go all the way to Milwaukee?
All right, don't go to Total Wine. Go to Top 10 Liquor. I'm going to do a little plug for my own store there.
Wow, an early plug.
I actually bought it on my way out the door. We got it in a couple weeks ago, and in our market in Chanhassen, the peanut butter stuff is very hit and miss. Sometimes it just flies, sometimes it stays. This I ended up kind of staying a little bit, so I jumped on it. It's really good. It's kind of like a smoothie sour, so it's got that sugar element to it, and it's not very carbonated, which is a big plus for me because I'm not a big carbonation guy. It sounds really weird and ridiculous, and it is, but it also tastes really good.
I'm all in on it, man. I want it now. So next time you're working, I might just have to make a little trip up there and pick some up.
Perfect.
Football. Let's talk football. We got Thor on. Thor, for everybody who doesn't know you, I think Ryan and Tyler Tyler obviously knows you. Ryan and I have followed from afar for a while and have been super
Tyler knows how
with...
good I am at NCAA 14 as well.
Yes, I do.
He knows. He knows I'm not joking online.
I have wanted to join that league you have for NCAA 14.
Please do.
Do
you got PS3?
I have the game. I do. And I have the game somewhere, but I don't necessarily always put my games back in their case. And so I can't find the game, but I have the case.
Okay. If you find the disc and it works whatsoever, you can do the NCAA revamp thing where you download it and then it's just on your system. You don't need the disc anymore. So even if it's a faulty one, as long as you can get it to go once, you'll be fine going forward.
I'm sold.
Just download.
I want to
We'll
do
talk
that.
after the show.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, for people who don't know you, the viewers on YouTube right now, and people who are going to be listening, why don't you tell people, what you do, Thor, for NBC Sports Edge, and kind of your journey there. How'd you get there?
So I cover I cover college football and the NFL draft, and I've been there for a long time now. I've been there for so long it used to be called Rotoworld. That will be a funny joke someday. But yeah, I started there, 12 years ago or so. And actually it's funny because the reason I started at NBC was a local connection. What happened was I was coming out of undergrad at Kansas. I got a job as an intern at MLB.com. So for one season, this was in 2008. So for that season, I covered the Twins like from my graduation date on. So basically from mid-May on, moved right from Lawrence to Minneapolis and started doing that. And then I did that through the end of their season. And I, doing like I was covering every home game basically is like the deal. You don't travel, but like you do the home games, and you get really lucky when the opposing beat writer doesn't show up, because then you get to cover the opposing team. So that was like the funnest times of being an MLB.com intern. Anyway, so I got done with that season, and then like of course the journalism industry was tanking, which was a delight for someone just getting out of J school. So I applied to one graduate school on a lark, mostly to get my parents off my back about living in the basement, and I got into it. Like I got into that the one that I applied to, that basically within a week of when I got this job at NBC or at Rotoworld. And the reason I got it probably was because the guy who put the listing out was, do you guys know Aaron Gleeman?
Yeah. Oh, I love Gleeman.
Yeah. So Aaron Gleeman used to work at Rotoworld, and, he was I didn't even know him from Rotoworld necessarily. First and foremost, like I knew him from his blog, AaronGleeman.com. Like I'd been reading that thing like since I shouldn't say since I was a kid, because I'll make Gleeman seem way older than me when he's like actually like 2 years older than me. But anyway, I've been reading that for like a really long time, and we communicated like a little bit. And then he, of course, read my work on MLB.com just because he's focused on the Twins, or at least at that time he was solely focused on the Twins. So he vacuumed up all the coverage, and fortunately enough for me, he did so, while he had this other job, and he solicited applications for part-time baseball jobs at Rotoworld, like doing the blurbs and stuff, game day blurbs. And so I applied, and I was lucky enough to get the job. Like I said, probably because he just read me for like 6 months before that, so I was probably super lucky about that. But anyhow, that's how I got my foot in the door, and then I did that part-time baseball through graduate school. I taught in China the next year, like in rural China, and I still did that job,
Wow.
the NBC job. Yeah, the worst shift I never know if in the past, can I call it Rotoworld, or do I have to call it NBC Sports Edge always now? I'm not sure. But anyway, like the worst shift there at my workplace is the West Coast baseball games, because they're on, like baseball, it's such a long season, and there's West Coast games like every night. And if you're in the central time zone like we are, it's a 9:05 start PM. And if you're in the Eastern time zone, it's a 10 p.m. Start. Well, anyway, then you'd have to watch the games for your shift, and then you'd have to write them up afterwards. Write like 4 or 5 blurbs on each game. And if some nights there's like 4 or 5 games, so and then if one, God forbid, like like a Dodgers against the Rockies game goes into like 15 innings, you'd be up until like there was a couple nights in grad school where I was up until like. There was one night where I was up till like 4 a.m. because one game went into like the 18th inning. Like at one point, like in the 13th inning, I just dozed off, and I woke up like in the 15th inning. I was like, whoa, I'm going to get fired. And the game was still going. But anyway, like I did that in China because the clock was flipped. So I would teach in the mornings, and then I would like have my, lunch at like the faculty cafeteria or whatever, because I didn't have to say a Chinese word to acquire that food, which is great because it was more of like a line. And then, I would go back to my apartment or whatever that they provided for me. And at that time, it'd be like noon or 1 or whatever. And in the States, it would be, it would be midnight or 1 a.m. Central time. So like the timing worked perfect. I could just go and blurb the game then. And then I could take an afternoon nap. And then I was, ready to do whatever I wanted to do that evening, which was generally, by the way, playing NCAA 2014, because one of my luxury items I brought, it's like, Survivor, when you used to be able to bring one luxury, the TV show, you got to bring one luxury item. My luxury item to China, which I had to tow through all the security checkpoints because I didn't check it. I brought it in my backpack, was my PlayStation 3, so that I could play NCAA 14, which turned out to be the last game that was disseminated, in that series or whatever. But that year I was in China, was 2013. So that game had just come out. So I played that game. I played 14 like into the ground until like I couldn't play the game anymore. And then I got, rid of it or whatever, stopped playing for a couple of years to bring this thing my soliloquy full circle, that I started playing again, 3-4 years ago, because the online community, whatever. And now I run all these dynasties, whatever. So yeah, anyway, that's why. So, and the other, 6 years ago, I got switched to college football NFL draft section. So that was the other part of the NBC thing. I got switched from baseball to there, which was awesome because college football is my first love. And I've always had a weird obsession with the NFL draft, even though I like college football. I suppose it's just an extension of that. And then also like being able to, even though like, I'm not good at math, but like, you get jealous of like the people that are able to like, predict the stock market or really, like do them, like be in their spreadsheets and like, tell the future or whatever. This is like a writer's one opportunity to be able to do that, is doing like NFL draft work, or for instance, handicapping college football games. So those are things like that I really enjoy, because you get quantifiable data coming back to you, whether you're succeeding or not, but you don't get fired for it. If I'm wrong, which is the difference between me and an NFL decision maker. So,
absolutely. Well, that's a hell of a journey. But I think, like I said, I love your work. I know these other two do. So I'm excited to pick your brain tonight, all of you. I don't know a lot about these offensive line prospects. I don't know a lot about these wide receiver prospects other than like the big names. We got Bateman here, Jamar Chase and some other offensive tackles. So let's dive into that. I know I was going to touch on kind of the Dakota Dozier signing. I think we all agree that that's crap, but it's more just a depth move. We don't need to spend any more time on Mason Cole as well. Let's get right into these draft prospects. And I think the first one that we should talk about is a name that's linked to the Vikings quite a lot by their fan base, Rashawn Slater. I know that with San Francisco trading up in the draft, there's belief that maybe with all these quarterbacks going top 10, that a guy like Slater could fall to the Vikings at 14. So I'll hand it off to you, Thor. Tell me about Rashawn Slater. Why should Viking fans like him? Do you think he's a fit here? Do you think he'll fall to us potentially? Tell me what you got.
That's a lot to unpack. I'll start with Rashawn Slater himself. He is a fit, and it's interesting. Like the difference between doing like a Viking specific draft discussion and doing like a national one, because when you're doing a national one, it's sort of like stacking your board. Like it's a difference between me and like Rick Spielman. Rick Spielman actually has real life stakes, in the moment or whatever, but he also has a team, a roster. He has perceived holes, et cetera. He has a budget, whatever, and schemes, offensive and defensive schemes. So like there's, these defined criteria to stack your board or whatever that I don't have. And so like, but the cool thing about talking about a team specific one is that you're able to define the criteria a little bit, and so you can be more specific. So like in a case of Slater, there's offensive linemen that the Vikings are they might not tell the media that they disqualify them, but they're essentially disqualified from their board because they're not athletic enough. Because whether they stay on it or not, they'll be ranked low enough that it won't matter because they know they're gonna go way above them. We all know this. The Vikings fetishize super duper athletic offensive linemen, and they're willing to take the risk. They're willing to roll the dice. There's many instances of bombs there, or times where they've just been flat out wrong. I mean, like we can go through like the whole list. And there's also times where they have been right. Brian O'Neill is the one that's always brought up with that. And the jury's still out of Bradbury and O'Neill, et cetera. But anyway, the whole reason that I'm saying that is Slater's a legitimate fit here, not only because of the zone scheme, which he'd be a fine fit in, but also just like, in a pragmatic way, I suppose you would say it, in that the Vikings, like, right now, this is either a good thing or a bad thing. Like when you're heading into the draft and you have some draft capital where you have multiple holes, but you can like switch people around in there. You have like some interchangeable pieces potentially, where the Vikings need 2 offensive line starters right now. I don't think that's an exaggeration. And so, you would hope that you can acquire them in the draft, at least one of them or whatever. And the way that it's configured right now is you have O'Neill at right tackle and you have Ezra Cleveland, I believe, at right guard. But O'Neill, there's no reason to believe that he couldn't play left tackle if you wanted him to, or that Ezra Cleveland couldn't play right tackle if you wanted him to, draft a prospect to play right tackle, left tackle. You can do the pieces how you want. But like with, for instance, Christian Darrisaw, his position versatility is probably less for sure than a guy like Rashawn Slater, where you can bring Slater into camp. The one question about his profile is, where exactly will he be best to play? But there's no question that he has legitimate 5-position starting NFL versatility. It's not theoretical. He's going to succeed and probably be a very, very high-end starter at one of these 5 positions. Obviously, it becomes more valuable the further down the spectrum you are. It's like in baseball, like when the guy who's like A-Rod in his prime when he was a shortstop, like with the Rangers or whatever, when you get that, or the Twins, I suppose, is a more topical one locally. Like when you have a bat like that, a catcher, it just elevates your lineup so much more, because you basically have a cheat code. It's a discrepancy in your lineup between what the catchers, OPS, or I'm not a baseball guy, the acronym, but OPS against the other guys. Like you head into every game with an advantage just because of that. Or whatever. But anyway, getting back to Slater, like you can go into camp there if you're the Vikings, and it seems like the Vikings are content with O'Neill at right tackle and maybe more or less content with riding forward with Cleveland at right guard. But, I think that they would be very cool with the idea of a guy that could come in where they could, with their boots on the ground, check out, Slater, who, again, no one knows what his best position is going to be. And then O'Neill, like how would he be at left tackle if Slater's the going to be the best at right tackle for the Vikings in their scheme? Will O'Neill be comfortable at right tackle? If Slater's indeed a better interior fit than on the outside, can Ezra Cleveland handle right tackle? Whatever. Like you could do all those moving things, whereas with a couple other tackle prospects in this class, it would be more delineated. You'd be more boxed in, where this kid has to succeed here or here because we can't move the pieces in that way. So that's a positive. And again, he's a fit. And then as far as like him as a player, like he was, the number 2. I mean, he was the second most dominant offensive lineman in 2019 behind Penei Sewell. And he played left tackle at Northwestern. And one thing that you like for a left tackle prospect who's sawed off like he is, that doesn't, because I think he has 33-inch arms, which is just right at the threshold. And with Slater's height and his wingspan, it's basically like right around league average for like guard, or a little bit above league average for guard. But for both, he's a little bit below what you would like at tackle. So you have length issues, which with longer defenders, they can get into your pads. That's the issue there. It's like in UFC, that's the reason why they show reach or whatever, because it actually matters. If one guy has a 4 or 5 inch wingspan advantage, it's an enormous advantage. But football fans, they don't think as much about that. But it's the same sort of thing. But like for a player like that, what you like to see is that against elite competition, and by elite competition specifically, we're talking about guys that have like trump card athletic, athletic trump cards, I suppose is the way that you would put it. Like guys that have like either upper tier movement or strength or both or whatever, and that guy can shut him down on the perimeter in pass protection, because that is your biggest concern in the NFL. Slater did that through a procession of them. Chase Young, Chase Winovich. I'm trying to think some of the other. Oh, the kid at Willikis from Michigan State. There was a procession of them that he shut down, or that he gave fits to that other tackles in that conference did not. And so like his game's going to translate just fine to guard. Like I don't think there's any question that he's going to be a Pro Bowl interior player, if not a tackle. But there's more value again. Going back to the baseball thing, if you have A-Rod's bat at first base or DH, it's not as valuable as if you have it at shortstop. It would be preferable to the drafting team to extract the most value out of him if he is a left tackle. And again, the Vikings happen to have an opening there. So they're one of the few teams that could legitimately audition him there and let him fail down the spectrum in practices if they wanted to. I think it's a great fit. Your other question, I hope that I've addressed all of them. I think I'm on the last one right now. But like, will he get there? I think it's about a coin flip right now. I do some of these like, live mock drafts or whatever, where it's like me and then another guy, and then it goes like pick. And I did 2 within the last week. And in one of them, Slater went above the Vikings, but it was only like a pick above. I remember because I got upset with my colleague Hayden Winks when he did it. I was super upset because I had the Vikings pick, and I wanted Slater so bad at that point. And then in my other mock, he fell to the Vikings, and I believe I had the Vikings again in that one because I rig it. So I if it's odd or even, depending on where the Vikings pick, I make sure that I'm on that side or whatever. But I believe in that one, Slater got there. So like you're the sort of point that you were setting up initially is correct, which is the more quarterbacks, specifically that are above the Vikings, the better. The dream scenario is that 5 of them are. Mac Jones would be the magic name. Like if you're a Vikings fan, you need to root really hard for Mac Jones in the pre-draft process, because that's a real thing. And you need to root really hard that this stuff is true, because that's one other guy above you that you will not take, that's going to drop one other guy down the board. So I would put it at about a coin flip that Slater gets there if they don't do a trade as the board is right now. And I think it's a slam dunk pick if he does.
Yeah, and to your point, if he doesn't make it to pick 14, I know that there's a lot of fans, myself included, to maybe trade back, get a day 2 pick, a second round draft pick, and go after some other kind of tackles. But if we trade back, another name I've heard about is the Vera Tucker guy. I think he's out of USC, right?
Yeah, he is. Yeah. And Vera Tucker's fine. For me, he's clearly a tier below Slater in a couple different metrics. I mean, number one, and some people disagree with me on this, but I don't believe that Vera Tucker is a tackle in the NFL. He's certainly not a left tackle. You couldn't play him there. And the reason is, again, going back to there's certain things with different prospects at different positions that you can isolate, and you can say, well, if that one thing is problematic enough, I can't like you to such and such a degree. Like a good example is like Drew Lock's discrepancy against good competition and bad competition, and with pressure and in clean pockets, et cetera. And with in that case, I lost my train of thought. Who was I going out about before?
Vera Tucker.
Oh, Vera Tucker. He got worked by Kayvon Thibodeau in the Pac-12 title game. Like in the first 5 games of the regular season, he did really well. So what happened with him was he was the starting guard for USC. I think left guard. I forget. But then left guard. And then Austin Jackson, the first round pick, he left. But Vera Tucker had won USC's Offensive Lineman of the Year in 2019. And so USC decided to try him at left tackle. In fact, I think it's one of the reasons that Vera Tucker even played period in 2020, because he initially was going to opt out. And Clay Helton, like he's even told this to the press, like they lobbied him to come back. And I think, the idea of like, we're going to play you at left tackle this year and sort of highlight that you can do more than people think, that was a part of the draw. And so that, they got him back, and it was great because like he played super duper well. Like his first 5 games, he was really, really good. But, again, like this is the similarity with Slater is that Vera Tucker is a similar height and wingspan and reach, whatever. And whereas Slater did really well against NFL competition. That was Vera Tucker's one shot, because in a lot of the other ones, he was playing guys that are not going to stay in the NFL or even get any sort of look from the NFL whatsoever. And against Thibodeau, he got absolutely rocked the entire game. It was not good. It was not a good showing. Multiple sacks, I think 6 or 7 pressures. When I say bad, I mean bad, almost disqualifying bad. But on the inside,
we're used to that as Viking fans.
Yeah, ain't that the truth, brother? Which is why we're always talking about offensive line draft needs, around this time. But yeah, again, for me, those things are disqualifying for me, in terms of playing on the outside in the NFL. And there's no reason to stretch him in that way, because his weaknesses get mitigated or masked on the inside, and his strengths, most of them play up. So he's a guy that you want on the inside. But again, for me, he's a drop down, when we're talking about the difference between him and Slater, for instance.
So talking tiers here, would you say that Slater and Sewell are on the tier of their own, or even Sewell's on his own tier and then Slater? Or who else would you put on that? I have Darrisaw up there, but what are your thoughts on him and any other names that come to mind that would be on that Slater tier for you?
Yeah, I guess I have Sewell on his own, because I think I put out draft rankings for 5 years, and he's the best offensive lineman that I've done. Quentin Nelson's the only other one that that comes to mind, but it's a different position. I think that Sewell can be, if not the best left tackle in football, one of the top 2 or 3 for a very, very long time, and that obviously has enormous value, as Laramie Tunsil, one of my favorite draft day stories and memories, as he can attest. The Miami Dolphins have entirely turned their franchise around, mostly because someone from Laramie Tunsil's personal life decided to disseminate photos of him smoking from a bong on draft day. It's really funny, how the universe works like that. The Dolphins would still be I don't know if I can swear on this show, but an S show, a poop show. Yeah. They'd still be a shit show if that hadn't happened. But now they have this war chest of picks that's going to keep flowering out or whatever. But anyway, I think that's that's one of the differences.
Tyler, there's a guy that I know you're high on. He's the tackle from Texas. The name escapes me right now, but sell me on him, because I've seen O-line rankings where he's not that high, but I trust your opinion. So I want you to tell me why you think that he would be a potential fit.
Absolutely. The guy you're talking about is Samuel Cosmi, and right now he is my offensive tackle 4. Just for clarification, I graded Slater on the interior, and I did not grade him as a tackle, because I graded him where I thought he would fit best, projecting to the National Football League. Cosmi, if you follow Kentley Platt at MathBomb on Twitter, he does the relative athletic scores, where he takes all of your athletic testing and combines it into one score. He's either going to be the first or second best tackle of all time with the relative athletic score, and that's going to factor in, we're talking almost 2,000 tackles. The other guy he's competing with right now is Spencer Brown out of Northern Iowa. Cosmi is an absolute freak athlete, ran a 4.84 at 6'7", 308. I really liked watching his film. Yeah, there were some issues. He had issues, especially with some strength. He also did this weird thing, and maybe Thor will know a little bit more about it. He didn't attack ever in pass protection. He was always on his heels, waiting for contact to come to him. And it felt like that was a Texas thing. And Texas wanted him to do that. And I thought that was really, really odd. Do you get a sense that that was a Texas thing, Thor?
I don't know if I'd say a Texas thing. I think in some ways it speaks to who he is as a player. Sometimes there's issues with him going into contact and stuff like that. And this is, and then in pass protection, I think one of his biggest issues is playing too high. But where the ceiling gets capped for me is I don't think that's something that he's ever going to be able to fix. Because I think he's just one of those guys who's a little bit stiffer in his hips. He's an awesome athlete, like you say. But some guys that are awesome athletes, they're more of, like, it's like, with receivers, there's some, those guys that don't look like they're going as fast, or like the upright runners or whatever, there's just like sort of different forms of this or whatever. And, in the same way, Cosmi's a good athlete. He is, and he moves around well and stuff like that. But like, he does play too upright, and he plays with his feet too close together in pass protection. And like, the good thing about him was like, he was like a lowly 3-star recruit. He was going to go to Houston, and then Tom Herman got the Texas job, and Cosmi went there. And then, after one redshirt year, he gained 30 pounds, and it turned out, whether he worked himself into this or whether this was just there, that he was like a really, really good athlete. And he turned himself into a really good football player. In the Big 12, you don't face as many of the freaks as, for instance, edge freaks, in particular, that you do, for instance, in the SEC. They just don't send as many to the NFL, whatever. And in Cosmi's case, like, what I noted is like, again, going back to, I mentioned this with quarterbacks, but like discrepancy in play against, average competition or slightly above average competition, and then like really, really good competition. And the way that I see Cosmi is like, I just think he is what he is. Like, again, like I don't think the playing too high thing, or some of those issues, like, getting into contact, whatever, some of the lurching stuff, I don't think that gets corrected, because I just think that's the way his body's built. But like, that being said, this is a kid that works very, very hard. Technically speaking, he's pretty good. Outside, some people would claim that his technique in pass protection is not good. But I think that is more of something that's inherent to him. I guess the only reason that matters, the descriptor matters, is because one, you could theoretically improve, whereas the other you can't. And so again, for me, even though Cosmi, like, he was really, really good over a long period of time at Texas. Texas threw the ball a lot. They played, good teams, whatever. But like those limits, and one that I haven't even mentioned, I don't think yet, is a reach disadvantage. I think his arms are 33 inches, which it happens to be the exact same arm length as Rashawn Slater. So like, even though he's a taller guy, there's not as long of a reach, which again, like, why does that matter? Because when, specifically, it matters in both. Like in pass protection, you're trying to keep your guy on the outside. You don't want him to get into your pads, because then he can do whatever. In the run game, of course, as well. But like, if you can keep him on the outside, and you can touch him first, again, going back to the UFC analogy, it's just a big advantage. And so to wrap this up, I think that the only time that you saw this manifested with Cosmi was when he faced really, really good competition. And in his case, it was Kayvon Thibodeau, or not. I'm sorry, that was in the other case. It was with Chase on. Like, LSU in the opener in 2019, like when we didn't know that LSU was awesome yet, and they happened to play Texas in that opener or whatever. Like, Cosmi didn't acquit himself very well in that game. And again, like, he did very well, most of the rest of his career and against most of the rest of his opponents. But like, when there's that discrepancy, like once you hit a certain mountain peak and then you get to the next tier of player, and then your play really drops off. What's concerning is like, you start to get the idea of like, are you not going to be able to make adjustments to your game or make improvements to your game to ever sort of address that discrepancy in this case in movement or in power or whatever? Like, are you ever going to be able to prevent a guy like Chase on from getting into your pads and or just getting your feet crossed up with movement because you're playing too high and your feet are playing are too close together? So that's the way that I see him. But because of his athletic profile, if the Vikings aren't going to move Cleveland to tackle in a similar way to Cleveland, I think Cosmi right now is probably ranked just about where Cleveland at this time last year, right? When he came in the league, they're right around the same spot in terms of the board. And Tyler was mentioning, like, in terms of athletic profile, that's what you look for. In terms of the movement skills, stuff like that. He seems like an offensive lineman the Vikings would keep on their board and potentially even elevate because of that athletic profile, and maybe even specifically more so if they feel that. Yeah, because I don't have access to this information, but like if they feel that Cleveland's a long-term guard only. Again, like, I don't know, but like if they feel like that, they're going to be more inclined to take a pure tackle, which Cosmi probably is. And so anyway, I do think he's someone for Vikings fans to keep an eye on because of those reasons.
I want to touch on another name that you mentioned a little bit ago, Thor, Christian Darrisaw out of Virginia Tech. Can you tell me a little bit more about him and how he projects? Is he kind of in the same realm as like Slater and Cosmi, like we were just talking about, or is he in a different tier?
Well, he's above Cosmi. He's probably pretty close to Slater, but again, it's sort of depending on what your flavor is. Whereas Slater is the guy that can play any. Darrisaw, I think his best fit is at right tackle. I suppose you could maybe try him at guard, but like it's unnecessary because he doesn't have one of those things in his profile that nullifies it. So again, it would be you'd just be sapping him of value. Darrisaw, I believe, was the PFF's highest graded Power 5 tackle last season. And he was number 2 to only Brady Christiansen. Funny enough, Brady Christiansen was awesome last year. And then he tested great too. But that was it wasn't the PFF grade wasn't a surprise. That the testing was anyway. But yeah, like with Darrisaw, and his story is really interesting. Like of a kid that was just totally overlooked in recruiting. He took the one Power 5 scholarship offer that he had, and he went to a prep school for a year. And then he showed up there, again, like he was just this low 3-star recruit that had to go to prep school, and he locked down their left tackle job for 3 years, and was awesome. He shut down everyone in the ACC, run blocking specifically. Like he's just awesome. But for one of those types of guys in pass protection, he has acquitted himself very well over a long period of time. Like he's a kid that works hard. Like you can see it in his, the progression of like how, much better he got year by year by year. Some people don't think that he plays with enough fire on the field. That confuses me watching him. Like the thing that jumped out to me was it's actually funny, like how I, came about Christian Darrisaw, I suppose it was actually because, I went to Kansas. I don't know if I mentioned that before or people know that, but like, I went to University of Kansas, and so like I'm one of the 15 remaining University of Kansas football fans, and so I watched a kid named Cleo Herbert for several years at Kansas. He was the backup running back to Puka Williams, and then he transferred as a graduate in 2020 and landed at Virginia Tech, and Kansas's backup running back who. A backup running back on all these teams that had 1 and 2 wins or whatever, losing to these FCS teams and Coastal Carolina every year, all this sort of stuff. Turns into a stud at Virginia Tech. He was the first 1,000-yard rusher in Justin Fuente's entire tenure there, which is at this point is like 8 or 9 years or whatever. And a big part of the reason, so I started watching for that reason. Is like, I'm mostly like to hate watch, I suppose, like as a Kansas fan, just like because like we have all these guys that like Jamar. This is an aside, but Jamar Chase was originally a Kansas Jayhawk football commit, believe it or not. And then they lost his commitment, of course. But like when you watch Cleo Herbert's tape, or in the moment when you were just watching Virginia Tech, what you would notice is like the left side of the line was always just getting shoved way back. And you'd be like, who's that kid? He's just like just resetting the line of scrimmage on the left like every single time or whatever. And so like offensive line play doesn't always jump off the screen in the moment. But he was one of those kids, like it sort of did. Because again, like you had Kansas's backup, a guy that went from being a backup running back at Kansas to being like the, one of the better running backs in the entire nation last year. And no slight to Herbert. Herbert's a good running back prospect. I rank him in the top 10, but like Christian Darrisaw made Khalil Herbert a lot of money with his run blocking last season.
Ryan, I know you had a question, so.
Yeah, well, we've talked about all these first-round offensive tackle prospects. There's a chance, obviously, we might go edge. We might maybe one of those top 3 receivers will fall to us, which would be really juicy, and we'll take one of them. But what about, and we don't need to go over a lot of them, but what's one offensive tackle prospect that maybe day 2, early day 3 that really has caught your eye? You mentioned Brady Christiansen a bit, so maybe let's avoid him. But, I know Tyler loves Deontay Smith. There's James Hudson out there. There's a few different guys, names that pop up. What's a mid-round, late, day 2, early day 3 prospect that would be interesting to you?
For the Vikings at tackle?
Yep. Or guard. I mean, I guess if that plan of Ezra moving to right tackle and O'Neal going to left tackle pans out, but
Yeah, so if it's day two, for me it's got to be Christiansen. Tyler might disagree with me there, but like, I suppose if Dylan Radins fell there, he's a great fit as well. But there's some guys that just aren't fits there. And the tackle class is like packed more at the top there, especially for a team like the Vikings that has such clearly delineated tastes, in that at that position or whatever. So for me, if it's going to be the tackle, it's either got to be in round one preferably or round two at worst. The interior class, you could probably get away a little bit more into round 3 and 4 with picking a guy where he potentially could take one of those two starting spots right away. And I do think that there's a couple fits because this interior class, there are some like athletic kids there that would absolutely be fits with what the Vikings do. One name, Jalen Moore from Western Michigan, who was a collegiate tackle. I think he's headed inside at the next level. And I think some of his limitations that hindered him on the outside in the MAC, and like he sort of gets embarrassed or how would you say, like he doesn't acquit himself well on tape because he's getting schooled by a guy that's not going to play in the NFL. But some of those things aren't going to be, it's another thing going back to the thing of like you move that guy inside, and the weaknesses that led to him getting schooled by kids not going to play in the NFL, they're going to be mitigated or just outright taken away on the inside. And he's a very athletic kid. He's a mobile kid, does well at the second level, et cetera. And so like his issues on pass protection, at left tackle and, whatever, they're not going to be issues if you move him inside. That would be one guy. And I would also just say in general, actually, I'll toss out two other names on the interior just because I'm here. Darius Hutcherson from South Carolina, super athletic kid. Vikings fans probably won't like him because he's like the most extreme version of this, of like the ball of clay guy that he's sort of like Beavers, where it's like a super fluid athlete, but who just remains really, really raw. He didn't play offensive line until he got to South Carolina. And so like, and his technique is still, he gotten better, but like, he still needs a lot of work, specifically in pass protection. But like, in terms of like a guy that moves really well, like, and just explosive, like, north-south off the snap, he's a guy that could fit. And I think another name to toss out is Royce Newman from Mississippi. Another guard that's like super athletic, so athletic that Jim Nagy was like tweeting about him like a long time ago. Like, you got to watch out for this kid. He moves really well and all this sort of stuff. And, size adjusted Raz Newman, he tested as over an 85th percentile athlete at the position as well, which you're certainly meeting the Vikings thresholds there. You're not going to get disqualified on their board. I think Pat Elflein's the last unathletic offensive lineman the Vikings are always going to, ever going to take. Like he was like, after the Elflein thing, they're like, we're done. And so like, for me, like, looking at guys that the Vikings could target, you almost have to be above at the offensive line position. You almost have to be above a certain athletic threshold and, to even be considered for them as a fit for their system. And those two guys are guys that will be available in the mid rounds and, maybe even into round 5, who knows, maybe even 6, one of them that potentially, again, like if you haven't taken that second offensive lineman, I would urge the Vikings to take 2 in their first 4 picks, if nothing else. But if you haven't, those are 2 guys that you could take that would certainly be system fits. And then you just do what you always do with the Vikings always do with offensive linemen, which is you take the super athletic kid and then you rock it and you just hope it works.
Tyler, Ryan mentioned a name that I saw your face light up. Can you tell me about who this guy is?
Deontay Smith, the left tackle at East Carolina. One of the really interesting things about him is in 2019, his listed playing weight was at 274. Played 1 game this year, got hurt, went to the Senior Bowl, weighed in the 290s. Then at his pro day a couple days ago, weighed in at 305. And when you look at the man, as far as what his body composition is, it's not bad weight. Yeah, like when you think of what Cameron Dantzler's pro day was last year, just so he could have some mass on him, he just had bad weight. Like just ate a bunch of McDonald's cheeseburgers to try and gain some pounds. Like, no, Deontay Smith put in the work, and you can tell that his body composition is good. And when I watch the tape, he's just doing a fantastic job of keeping the guys in front of him. He's got adequate movement skills, and I think I haven't had a chance to look at his RAS yet, but his athletic testing wasn't poor. I don't know if it's going to necessarily meet the thresholds. And obviously, if you want those thresholds, Arif just re-released his articles that he does every couple of years talking about what those thresholds kind of metrics are and what players have and haven't met them in certain positions. I love the fact that Deontay Smith is going to be available in the round 3, round 4 range. He's a really good pass protector. He has flexibility to play inside. And I think if you're going to draft that guy as a developmental piece and kind of what the Vikings are going to ask him to do right away, he'd be able to be kind of that 6th offensive lineman, play inside and out. I don't think he'd be ready day one, but I think give a year or two, he could develop into a really solid starter for the Purple. And he's probably my favorite player in this draft class.
Wow. For your sake, then I hope we take him.
Yeah, me too, because last year was Jason Strobridge, and now he's a Dolphin.
Ryan, I feel like I haven't heard a lot from you, and I know you know your stuff as well. Are there any offensive linemen that we haven't touched on that you kind of want to shed some light on? And if not, maybe you want to toss us over to the wide receiver group, and we can get started there.
Yeah, we could probably go receivers. Another name that's going to be popular amongst Vikings fans, I think, in the first round is Tevin Jenkins. Again, he tested even better athletically than I anticipated him to test based on tape that I watched. Again, I still can't get the image of Ronnie Perkins, destroying him during that Bedlam game. So I have a hard time thinking that he's going to be a great fit for us, but I need to take that out of my brain because it's not a good look. But outside of that, like I said, like Thor was saying, actually, there's a lot of talent, I think, athletic talent in this draft that we can take a look at. But I think we really do need to focus on, day one, if not second round, if we do decide to trade back. Another offensive lineman that I like, again, tested way more athletically than people anticipated was Creed Humphrey. Again, he's not going to be a tackle for you. He's going to be probably a center actually in the NFL, but I bet he can flex out to guard. And we aren't a sure thing at center. I mean, Garrett Bradbury, I don't think can play any other position, but he's been awful. So I know there's all this talk that, he's had incompetent guards at his sides. I understand that. I get it, but he's been bad. So we may look at, some competition there if we bring Creed Humphrey in and think that he might be a better fit at that center position. But yeah, outside of that, I'd love to talk receivers just because receivers is something I hadn't focused a ton on. And I know Thor's, done a lot of work there. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about our hometown guy, Rashad Bateman. Do you think that, if we traded back, do you think that's somebody we would consider in round 1 to kind of flush out the rest of this receiving core?
That would sort of surprise me just because, of course, you're in some ways hamstrung by your draft equity. And, it's sort of like, you guys ever watch that movie Butterfly Effect with Ashton Kutcher or whatever? Yeah. It's one of the best terrible movies. You love like the good, bad movies. Like that one for sure is. But it's like this idea that like one decision like changes the future, whatever BS. But in this case, traded the second rounder for the edge guy that didn't play here for very long, and then you trade him for a late third round pick. That kind of hurts here, because again, it goes back to my thing of like with the tackles there at the top, and then the class sort of drops off. So, with regards to Rashad Bateman, I love Rashad Bateman. Like I think that he's nationally, I think that he's underrated, and I don't always think that with Gopher prospects. In fact, I got into a fight with a Gopher employee the past couple of weeks because he thought I was being too critical of Gophers, which is funny because I'm like banging the drum for Rashad Bateman every day. Like, stop it. But anyway, like I love him, and I do think that Bateman would be a really good fit on the receiving corps because similarly to the offensive philosophy wise, like. The Vikings, the way that, and again, this is like a thing that you could either look at as good or bad. Like for the draft, it's good because you have options. But like in terms of just overall an indictment of the way the team's been built, it's sort of bad. But like you think about like the receiver thing, like that, in my opinion, Irv Smith is not a long-term option at inline. I think that he's an H back, and so I think like you need to decide. Are you going to go forward, taking a third receiver off of the field so that you can play Irv Smith? They need to decide that as an offense. And so, that's a decision before, even this begins. But like, even though, again, like I really like Bateman and I think you get a slight discount on him. So I think, your idea of trading down, you could absolutely do that and you could recoup value and you could get value back with Bateman. And it would make the receiving core one of the best in the NFL. Because, Bateman's a true X receiver. He's a true number one. I don't think he's going to be the best one in the NFL. But the way he runs routes, like his combination of feet and then sort of play strength and then ball skills once the ball gets there, but like the feet and the way he's fortified and again the strength, it makes it impossible for guys to stop him off the line, which becomes important because he's one of the better route runners you're going to see coming out of college. And a part of that is just like he understands really well. Some guys are crafty. He has that for sure. But his footwork is just so good. And it might go back to his days as a basketball player. I'm not sure. That's really what it seems like because it's sort of, I talk about like trump card skills. Rashad Bateman's footwork at that size, on the outside as a receiver, it's really, really upper tier or whatever. So you can't stop him off the line. And then it's really, really hard to stay with him because of the route running. It doesn't even matter. Some people are like, oh, he's not as athletic. It's like, bro, like if someone just destroys you in their route, just watch Bateman. Like he gets guys turned around, like literally turned around because of the route he's run. Like he fools them so bad, they'll make the wrong cut. And to get back to him, their most efficient path is it's a literally pirouette. And like, you don't see that with a lot of route runners. Devonta Smith has a couple of those on in his film catalog, but most guys, you don't get that. But even when it's not issues of just like outright clowning or getting guys crossed up, stuff like that, like, breaking their ankles on a crossover or whatever, almost invariably on every single play, he has some level of separation because of his routes, and his ball skills are really, really good. I would say elite, but the only issue is he has more concentration drops than I would like. The way that I put it when I talk about him, like other is like if it was just his 10 best catches, like if you just did like the past like 3 receiver classes and it's just their 10 best catches, Rashad Bateman is probably number one. He has catches that seem impossible, in terms of like running full speed and snatching the ball out of midair with one effing hand and continuing to run. Like you don't see that where he just like stabs it like with his like talons out of the air, like a falcon coming down, a fish jumps out of the water, just snatches it. And then flies back up into the, like that's what you see with Bateman. You don't see that with other kids, because there's like a fluid, but even though he has like the sort of vice grip hands or super glue hands or whatever metaphor you want to use, like he suffers from too many drops. There's instances where anyone, the ball's in his breadbasket, but he's like looking upfield or whatever, concentration things or being preoccupied with other things that he shouldn't be. And again, these are isolated things, but it's something you have to bring up because he has to correct those things. Because outside of that, always open and his hands are really, really good as long as starts catching every single one. But I should say too, I bring that up. There's prospects where their issues with this are so pronounced that it's concerning. And Hakeem Butler is one, for instance, where there was a lot of concentration drop, but that in that case it was more, and I probably should have been more concerned about it. And the caveat I want to give to what I just said, because sometimes you lose the forest from the trees when you talk about stuff like this, because things become analogous or whatever. Bateman's issues with concentration drops are not disqualifying. They're not nearly as acute as, for instance, a guy like Butler or some of those other guys we've seen that have had a similar issue. It's just one of the he doesn't have a ton of them in his game that they're clear areas of emphasis to improve, but that's one of them. The other one is a physical player and he has plus play strength and he's a very competitive player too. And I think sometimes downfield, he can try to bowl through defensive backs, and stuff like that for the ball, or, hold them onto the ground for a split second and think you can get away with something, hold their jersey, whatever. But again, there's not a ton of that stuff. That's just stuff that he can improve on. But as far as the other stuff, again, like straight X receiver, and the beauty on a team like the Vikings is they can sort of decide on their offensive future based on the position things here. But also, like, if they did decide to go to three wide receivers, going forward, something they haven't done the past couple of years. But if they do that, the one sort of beautiful thing for them is, as you guys know, both of the receivers they have right now have not only proven to be studs in the slot, they've also beautifully proven to be slots on the outside. So, in a very similar way to Rashawn Slater, the Vikings, if they did decide we want to go forward with a 3 wide receiver offense, on the vast majority of our plays or whatever, they would have a ton of leeway here, talking about the receiver class on who they wanted to take, because they could go slot and keep the other 2 on the outside, or they could take a true X, for instance, like Bateman, and play one of the other guys in the slot. But the last point I'll make is the one reason that I wouldn't do that as the Vikings, unless it would just became an insane value, it's just because you don't have that second round pick, and their offensive line need, and they have an edge need too, of course. But the offensive line thing, needing 2 of them, and that sort of being a tire fire right now, and then knowing how much that drops off, specifically at the tackle class, they're going to have to use one of those first. Well, in fact, they'll probably have to use their first pick, because they don't have their second one's not coming up till the 3rd round. So, that's why probably I would focus myself on offensive line, unless like a guy like Pitts fell and you just didn't have a choice.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point there, right? Like, it's not to say that Rashad Bateman is a bad fit for the Vikings. He's actually a great fit, but given positional need at offensive tackle and edge, and where they kind of rank within this class, and given how deep the wide receiver class is, it may just be better for them to address those needs early and kind of tackle some wide receivers late. So, Tyler, I'm going to toss it to you here. Who are some of those late round wide receivers? Keep in mind we are heading close to the end of the show, so we'll try and wrap it up here. But I do want to give you an opportunity to talk about some late round wide receivers.
Well, one of the interesting things about this class is there are a lot of guys you can get late. But one of the things kind of Thor mentioned is whoever you take it, they're kind of going to be pigeonholed into one spot as you get to those late rounds. Jalen Darden out of North Texas, he tested incredibly well. He's got some fantastic tape, really, really big deep ball receiver, but he's 5'9". So he's probably going to be pigeonholed in the slot at the next level, kind of like a deep ball specialist early on as he kind of grows and develops a route tree. Seth Williams, if you want a guy on the outside, he's kind of a wild card because his quarterback at Auburn was Bo Nix. Bo Nix, as most of you know, it's just not it. He's very bad at football. And Seth Williams did flash a lot as kind of like that big-bodied receiver. He and J.C. Horn had a really fun battle this past year with the South Carolina-Auburn film. Highly recommend you seek it out, boys, if you haven't. And then you talk about another slot guy who I really like, Shi Smith out of South Carolina. He had a fantastic Senior Bowl. He's just going to be a gritty receiver in the slot. He's going to get open. He's going to make the tough catches. There's just a lot of guys with a lot of different profiles you can take on that day 3. And then even towards like the end of round 3, kind of depending on how the NFL views them, I think I have a 3rd round grade on him, but I don't think the NFL will. And Diami Brown, he has been getting more and more conversation as being like a maybe even late 1st round pick. I think that's too rich as far as me personally, especially coming out of that offense in North Carolina where he basically ran 3 routes. Dwayne Eskridge, obviously, you guys know, is my boy. I absolutely love his game, but he's also 23, and he's only played the position 2 years. It's kind of a little bit of a red flag. There's guys all across the board where you can take one, and maybe, I don't think it's likely, but Stephon Diggs went in probably now the 3rd most rich receiver draft of all time in 2015, and this is more rich than last year, and that was better than 2015. There's guys to be had that can be day 1 contributors probably in round 4 and 5. So if the Vikings want to find that wide receiver 3 with the other needs they have, they can wait on it and feel pretty comfortable that they can step in and make an immediate contribution.
Ryan, any guys that you kind of like in those late rounds that Tyler didn't mention?
Yeah, one of the guys he didn't test nearly as well as his tape, implies, but I like Daz Newsome out of North Carolina, so Diami Brown's running mate. And what I like about him is, again, he can be a little bit of, he's a slot guy likely in the NFL, but he does have that ability to, run those reverses and do some of those gadget things that we, kind of miss in this offense. We don't have a lot of that in this offense. But then another huge thing, again, when you're talking about a guy likely going in the fifth or later, maybe, is he provides punt return ability. So it's something that we have a huge gap on this team right now in kick return, punt return. He's an excellent punt returner, ran one back actually last year. So I like Daz Newsome, and I never know how to say this guy's name, but the main receiver out of Illinois, Tyler.
It matter, big.
Yeah. So again, another older prospect. I think he's like 23 as well. But again, he provides that deep ball game and provides that ability to kind of go up and snatch the ball. Not something necessarily that we're missing because, Justin Jefferson showed he can do that. Thielen makes tough catches all the time, but it provides you a little bit of a bigger body as well. Again, I don't think he's going to really provide much in the special teams. So I'd rather try to get somebody who can contribute in the special teams. So I do like Dwayne Eskridge, as Tyler had mentioned, because he provides that kick return, punt return ability, the gadget play ability, and the big play ability. So that's what I'm personally looking for out of my wide receiver 3 right now. But yeah, there's, like Tyler said, and Thor, I'm sure you agree, there's a lot of options here, a lot of quality talent in this receiver class.
Yeah, and I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't give Thor an opportunity to also highlight some names here, because he only talked about Rashad Bateman, which I know many Viking fans would love, but wide receiver is one of the most fun positions to probably scout and probably talk about, because it's flashy. Fans love wide receivers. So Thor, if there's any names, I'll let you kind of take us home here. If there's any names we didn't talk about that you just have a crush on and you just have to get it off your chest, let's hear it.
Yeah, again, like from the Vikings perspective, one of the cool things is we know they're going to take a wide receiver. I'd be stunned if they didn't use at least one of their picks on a receiver. And, depending on philosophically the decision they make on the offense going forward, vis-a-vis the 11 against 12, regular personnel going forward, whatever, they could potentially use one of their top couple picks on a receiver if you want to go forward like that. And again, like because of, the skills of their other two guys where you have the versatility to go inside, outside, the game is open for the Vikings. And in what's cool about that in this specific receiver class, you guys have mentioned it, like really, really deep class. It's a really good class. Like this class, and I love last year's class. We were all talking about how that was one of the best we'd seen like in a really long time. This one is definitely better at the top, and probably through 4 tiers or so. The other one might have been just a little bit deeper, but this one, in terms of like the middle tier and the deep tier, is deeper than almost any other class, outside of that comparison or whatever. And so like for the like when I'm on other like things where it's like usually when it's a radio show or podcast, it's like team specific. When it's like we need a mid-round slot receiver because the other 2 spots are taken, or it's the other way. We need an outside receiver in the second round or whatever. The cool thing, and I know I'm harping on this point again, but like for the Vikings, it's choose your own adventure. And in a deep class, there are going to be guys that fall again because like just in general, this happens all the time. But like even just think like case specific. The thing of like being boxed into specific needs. Like if you only need a slot receiver and you're sitting dead right on one, like early in day 3, like you're not going to take a receiver, outside receiver, whatever. Like you're going to take the more reliable slot guy. And this can also lead to players matriculating down the board. So I would keep my options open, when I do take them. If I was the Vikings, specifically with this position, one of the guys that I like is Nico Collins. From Michigan. It's funny, like he was way more of a sleeper a week ago than he is now. I think I rated him a wide receiver 11 or 12 when I put my receiver things out like 3 weeks or a month ago. And I thought that I liked Nico Collins more than, consensus or whatever. But like even to me, his pro day performance was stunning. He tested, I think it was 95th percentile plus. And what was not stunning, like really well built kid, and we knew he had deep speed. He's one of those long, it's like for Vikings fans, they know exactly what we're talking, like the long galloping speed, where he chews up grass. Again, like, I think I talked about this before, but they're going faster than they actually look. That's like Nico Collins. He runs more like a horse with the long strides, whatever. But like he takes a few steps to get going. But like this stuff all played out in his testing. The explosion, the 40 time, etc. The deep speed that we saw in college, and he showed that at Michigan, even though he played with an abominable quarterback in Shea Patterson, who had all sorts of accuracy, couldn't even hit receivers at the combine against air. But anyway, like that led to some issues for Collins. But like what we didn't see in college was like Collins doing stuff in the intermediate area as much, and he would just disappear for like long stretches. Again, like part of it was Harbaugh and their philosophy, and a part of it was Patterson's accuracy issues, etc. But like the way that Collins was typically employed was like that deep stuff, and I didn't think that he had the ability to change directions as crisply as it turns out that he did, because he had the third or the second best 3-cone if you combine the last 3 receivers classes, behind only Denzel Mims, which again was flat stunning. Absolute. That's one of the more stunning official results of pro day season to me so far. And so Nico Collins, like there's a lot of guys in this class that like, they could maybe be a secondary receiver and there may be a slot, something like that. Nico Collins is one of the few guys, and Rashad Bateman is another case where their upside is clear X number 1 type receiver. If Nico Collins, like if that athleticism translates in the NFL, and there's reasons to explain why he didn't have more catches and more production in college, because he didn't play in 2020 with the opt-out, and then Shea Patterson was quarterback beforehand in a Harbaugh offense. If that athleticism that we saw, specifically the side-to-side, the agility, because don't count the speed twice. We already know he had the deep speed, and of course his frame, whatever. But if the other stuff, the change of direction ability, if that translates into route running in the intermediate area, that kid could absolutely be a steal, because he could become a number 1 outside NFL receiver, and he's absolutely going to be available on day 2, and we'll see. He might even fall into day 3 despite his test, because his tape is sort of spotty. So that's another guy that I would look at. I like Darden as well. Tyler brought him up, so I probably don't need to talk about him, but he works too. And then Seth Williams, like another guy that tested better than I thought he would. The Auburn receivers, Tyler sort of touched on this for a little bit, but like the Auburn receivers, him and Schwartz are 2 of the harder receivers to sort of exactly pin your finger on in this class, because their quarterback accuracy was so bad. Bo Nix, who's the new Shea Patterson, or Bo Wallace, if you're an older college football fan.
Oh, Wallace.
Bo, yeah, and you got the Bo, SEC, like the Dr. Bo thing, bring it back. But like, Nix's accuracy is not good, and like with Schwartz is just Schwartz is going to be one of the fastest players in the NFL, and may be the fastest from the second he walks on to the field. Like he has Olympic level speed, but it's also like top of Olympic level speed, world class speed. But like a term that's used too much, where Schwartz actually has it. But like Williams is more the true outside guy. The bigger guy and the more muscular guy, whereas Schwartz is the long guy. But like neither of them, Bo, Nix, used to their full potential. They had yards left on the field all the time. So those guys are difficult. But like what I will say is I was lower on Williams than others, but I did not believe that he was quite as athletic as he showed to be. He's definitely not like in the Nico Collins type area, but like I thought that there was more issues with like separation and stuff like that. Guys getting stuck to him. But again, like sometimes it's hard. Like you watch a prospect who their quarterback, their accuracy is just horrible. To parse some of that stuff. I didn't think he was quite as good of an athlete as he ended up showing. So for me, I have to bake that in, just intellectual honesty. Like, you bake that. So he's going to move up a little bit for me. I don't know how far he's going to fall, but Nico Collins would probably be my guy. Jonathan Adams is one other guy I'll toss out that I like a lot. He tested better as well than I thought he would. Arkansas State kid. And his ball skills are insane. So another one to keep your eye on.
I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch this episode just so I can write these names down and watch them. I hate that we are out of time because I could sit here and listen to you guys talk about these draft guys. I think it's one of the best times of the year for the NFL and for college football. So I just want to kind of end it here and let Thor kind of give a plug to what he's working on, and then we'll wrap up. But I know, Thor, you have some writings, or you write up some stuff for NBC Edge. Your latest one being your interior offensive line rankings. What are you working on right now, and when can viewers expect to see that?
Yeah, so the next one will be my linebacker rankings. They'll be out next week, and I'm just going position by position and working towards my 500 player big board at the end. It was sort of the culmination of my ranking series, and then I do 500 player comps with that. So that's my favorite thing to put out every year because you go into the work of having to parse that board. And so, that's what we're doing now. And I'll have some mock drafts coming up now that the dust is cleared with free agency. And I'll be done with my deep dive in all these positions, thankfully soon, because it's a lot of work going into to get that deep. But so that's going to be coming up, and then you guys can NBC Sports Edge, the NFL draft section, and then you can find me on Twitter at Thorku, THORKU.
Fantastic. Ryan, Tyler, thank you for hopping on. Thor, in the midst of probably the busiest times of year for you, thank you for taking the time to hop on this show and making it work. I want to have a beer with all of you once restrictions are lifted, since we're all here in the cities. And for our viewers, thank you for stopping by. And if you're listening, I hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure you tune in next Wednesday night at 8 p.m. We're back on our normal night. We will have Daniel House from Viking Corner and Gopher Guru on to talk about Gopher prospects for the NFL draft, as well as Vikings free agency, etc., whatever kind of comes up. So, again, thanks, guys, and we'll see y'all next week. Skol Vikes.
Thank you for watching or listening. As always, if you like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. And if you're listening to the podcast, please rate us on your favorite aggregator. Skol, everybody.